Russia is intensifying its attack on Ukraine as videos posted to social media show a missile striking the capital city's main TV and radio tower. A giant Russian military convoy is also reaching the edge of Kyiv as Russian troops appear to have several other cities surrounded. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in this war is getting worse. The UN says nearly 800,000 Ukrainians have already crossed the border into other European countries to flee the war and projects that the number could reach 4 million. Let's bring in senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky in Lviv, Ukraine, along with ABC's Elizabeth Schulze in Washington for more. Aaron, the U.S. ambassador to the UN just spoke before the General Assembly, saying that Russian forces are moving exceptionally lethal weapons into Ukraine that have no place on the battlefield. What are you hearing on that front? What weapons is she talking about?
She's talking about cluster munitions and so-called vacuum bombs that the Ukrainians have said the Russians have brought to bear here. We haven't been able to independently confirm it ourselves, but the Ukrainians have consistently said that the Russians are using these munitions, which only increase the lethality when it comes to civilians. And already hundreds of civilians have been killed or injured. The Ukrainians said today it may be as many as 2,000, another number we haven't been able to independently verify. But it does show that civilians have increasingly been put in the crosshairs here. The Ukrainian President Zelensky said today that Russia was targeting civilians, even though the Russians deny it. But he says that Russian projectiles have hit hospitals and schools. Shells have been heard falling in residential areas. That has sent more people scurrying below ground. And below ground has been fascinating, Diane, because hospitals have had to set up maternity wards in basements or in underground parking garages. One doctor in the eastern city of Kharkiv said 4 women gave birth underground just in the last hours. Incredible to think of what's happening as life must go on in certain aspects, even amidst this bombardment.
Amazing, Aaron. And the U.S. ambassador also called for nations to vote on a resolution to hold Russia accountable. Let's listen to that.
The United States is choosing to stand with the Ukrainian people. We are choosing, in coordination with our allies and partners, to impose severe consequences on Russia. We're choosing to hold Russia accountable for its actions, and we will soon turn to vote on a resolution that does just that. We believe this is a simple vote. Vote yes if you believe UN member states, including your own, have a right to sovereignty and territorial integrity. Vote yes if you believe Russia should be held to account for its actions.
So, Elizabeth, what kind of an effect would this resolution have? Is this just symbolic, or can this come with real consequences?
Diane, forceful words there really in this resolution that would demand that Russia withdraw its forces from Ukraine. This is largely symbolic. It wouldn't be legally binding, but it would carry enormous clout in the international community. Getting this number of countries on board to condemn Russia is yet another signal of how Russia is being isolated diplomatically. Very few countries standing by it at this time, essentially putting pressure on President Putin from all sides to condemn what is happening in Ukraine. The U.S. ambassador made a point of saying that this is a fight for democracy, that Russia's actions go against everything that the United Nations stands for. So really, this is a point to make that this is a united front in that belief that the UN must stand up for this in light of these military violations, the human rights violations that we're witnessing.
And Aaron, videos circulating on social media verified by ABC News show an explosion overnight at an airbase about 25 miles from Kharkiv. So what's the latest on the fighting?
Well, Kharkiv is one of 5 cities that the Russians have increasingly encircled, Diane, and it's thought that they could then, from those positions, move on to the capital of Kyiv. That is still believed to be the main objective of the Russians, to take the capital, decapitate the Zelensky government, and install a puppet regime. But how they get there, they seem to give themselves options. We've talked about a convoy that could come in from the north. That still seems to be kind of stuck in its position. They have increasingly taken control of southeastern port cities of Mariupol and Kherson. That could mean troops come up from the south. It would be a longer way, but Kharkiv in the east and other northeastern cities could also provide an alleyway for Russian forces to take the capital. And it shows why so many here are on the move. Nearly 1 million people now, the UN says, have left the country for safer ground. And on the streets here behind me, there's so many things going on. I just saw a family pull up and spill out of a car. All sorts of belongings headed up to an apartment for undoubtedly coming from somewhere perhaps more violent. And then also on the street now we see police with long guns. I've seen them now that curfew has fallen, checking papers, checking IDs. There's a real fear of Russian saboteurs on the streets. It's why people have formed up neighborhood watch groups. They've filled those beer bottles as Molotov cocktails, kept them in ditches along the side of the road just in case they're needed.
And Elizabeth, a spokesperson for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, says Ukraine will send a delegation to meet with Russian negotiators tonight. So what's on the table in this second round of talks, and what are the chances of a ceasefire?
Diane, hopes are dim for a ceasefire here. As one U.S. official told us, these talks are a sideshow. Really, these negotiations are an effort to show that there is an attempt at peace, but really that's not what is happening on the ground. We heard from the foreign minister of Ukraine, who essentially said Russia needs to stop issuing these ultimatums. And President Zelensky has said they need to stop the attacks before we have actual conversations about peace. That is not what's happening on the ground, though, of course, these talks are going to continue. We are waiting kind of for what exactly will be discussed. No big hopes for some sort of breakthrough, though.
And Aaron, Ukrainian forces have been doing all they can to resist Russia's advance. How much ground have they lost so far?
Well, officially, they haven't lost any. You know, the Ukrainians say they remain in control of just about every major city in the country. But we're starting to get some worrying word from Mariupol, the port city on the Black Sea, and from Kherson nearby, that the Russian forces have them surrounded. And the mayor of Kherson seemed to acknowledge that the city could soon fall into Russian hands. The Ukrainian defense forces are doing a yeoman's work, but how long they can hold out against the much more powerful Russian army is only a matter of time.
All right, Aaron Katersky in Lviv, Ukraine for us, Elizabeth Schulze in ZC. Thank you both.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out.